This might surprise you. Yes, there is a lot of buzz around the launch of Canon's new 45mm 1.2 because it's rare for such a lens to be the cheapest options across the market, and at 500 euros I couldn't find anything cheaper. Rumors say that in terms of quality it will match the cult classic 50mm 1.2, which cost much more, so excitement is running high. Where's the catch? Judging by the comments, many people don't realize there is one. I think after this video you will look at 1.2 lenses differently, but there is still a good chance that you will be tempted by the new 45mm, only it will be a more conscious purchase. We will also answer the question, for whom is the classic 51.8 a better choice? Let's get into it. During the launch of the Z system, Nikon made one of the biggest mistakes in its history. Maybe I'm exaggerating. The second biggest. As flagship lenses to sell the system, they released small, professional 1.8 primes, creating perhaps the most ambitious, underrated and misunderstood series of lenses in the history of photography. The first comment? Canon has it cheaper. We want 1.2. 1.8 is for amateurs. What was Nikon's mistake? They tried to break user habits. We'll come back to this story later because it has an amazing finale, but first things first. For years, photographers have been accustomed to the fact that the speed of a lens is linked to its price. After all, fast lenses are harder to manufacture. They not only require larger glass elements, but also require more elements to be placed within their construction. So to get an 1.2 aperture, you have to pay a premium. Thus, we often have the cheapest, weakest 1.8 lens, then the mid-range 1.4 and finally the premium 1.2 model. And Nikon forgot about this scheme. Many people also assume that the more expensive lens not only gives access to faster apertures and shallower depth of field, but it's also better than the cheaper models when stopped down. But is that really true? Or maybe it's a myth? Let's check this out before you buy the new 45 1.2. A classic Canon kit from the DSLR era will help us here. Let's start with the Canon EF 50mm 1.2L, the premium glass introduced in 2006. You can still buy it brand new for 1600 euros or for half the price on the second-hand market. We will compare it to the very well-liked 50mm 1.4 USM from 1993. You can still buy new copies for slightly over 300 euros. Finally, the budget classic, the 50mm 1.8 Mark II, plastic fantastic from 91. I think anyone who had Canon in the 90s or 2000s know this lens. Yes, these are old lenses, but I chose them specifically because this new 45mm 1.2 is supposed to have quality comparable precisely to this old L series lens. This L has an advantage in this context because it's 10 years younger in terms of design. We'll check out on the new lenses later. So let's start with the EF 50mm 1.2L lens. The thick line shows sharpness in the center of the frame. The thin line shows sharpness at the edge. And as expected, sharpness increases as we stop down the aperture. It is also visible that the edge of the frame is clearly less sharp than the center, and while stopping down, the center gains significantly more than the edges. Let's compare this data to EF 50mm 1.4 lens. The chart starts half a stop later and the center of the frame records very comparable results to the more expensive L series. So how does the sharpness look at the edges? And here is a surprise. The slower lens handles edge sharpness much better starting from f2.8. And how does the famous plastic fantastic 50mm look in this comparison? The center of the frame again matches the more expensive lenses. So what about the edge? Although this time the budget option had to yield to the 1.4 version. From f4 the image sharpness at the edge of the frame is higher than on the most expensive lens in this lineup. But that's not all, because in 2016 Canon released the successor to the Plastic Fantastic, in which build quality was improved and the plastic mount was abandoned in favor of a metal one. Let's see how this affected the results. The center of the frame gained slightly from this change, so how did the edges change? Surprised? The cheapest lens in the lineup records the best results, and that's from wide open. So we have busted the myth that more expensive, faster premium lenses will be better than the cheaper and slower ones when stopped down. We not only pay extra for faster apertures, but we often sacrifice sharpness when stopped down as well. Of course, these were quite old designs, but they started this myth. We will get back to the newer ones later. Let's stay for a moment on this comparison of 51.2 and the newer 50mm 1.8 STM. Why? Because according to announcements, we can expect more or less such charts when comparing the new 45 1.2 with the current RF 50mm 1.8 STM. Who should buy 51.8 and who will be better with 45 1.2? First of all, we pay for the first part of the chart, the fast apertures. Materials promoting the new lens are dominated by shallow depth of field and bokeh in today's trendy vintage style. Even in the main photo promoting the lens, Canon doesn't hide the severe chromatic aberrations while wide open. This makes it a lens for anyone looking for visually appealing optics in a classic design and planning to use it at fast apertures. However, if this type of photography doesn't appeal to you and you mainly shoot stop down, it's much better to buy the cheaper and optically superior 1.8 version. Of course, you may argue that it's better to have the ability to shoot with 1.8, even at the cost of some quality loss. But you may also ask, is the 1.2 really that different from the 1.8? And yes, one stop of light is noticeable, although in practice it won't matter as much. Well, now I've helped. And what does it look like with modern lenses? Let's return to Nikon's history. 2 years after initial launch, they released 51.2, weighing as much as 1 kilogram and constructed of whopping 17 elements. Let's compare the results based on measurements from the 45 megapixel sensor of Nikon Z7. First, version 1.8. In the frame center, even at wide open, we have fantastic results, and when stopping down, the lens borders on record values. The edge of frame is weaker, but the values are still impressive. So let's see how version 1.2 performs. We start over a stop of light earlier and it's fantastic, but the lens doesn't exceed the record values of the darker, cheaper design. What does the edge of the frame look like? At wide open the results are also impressive, but from 2.8 the 4 times cheaper lens takes the lead. The myth of stop-down premium lens is being shattered again, although it's clear that Nikon has really put in the work and it's practically irrelevant. And now for the surprising finale, Nikon recently released a budget version of the 50mm 1.4. Let's take a look. You can see that the frame center starts out much weaker, although at f4 it proves better than the 1.2 model. What about the edge of the frame? Surprisingly, from f2.8 it performs better than much more expensive lenses. Were you surprised that there's virtually no difference between the lenses from f4? In my comparison of the Canon RF 51.8 and RF 51.4, there wasn't much difference from f4 either. This confirms the theory that when buying more expensive lenses, we pay for apertures from 1 to f4. And it's clear that in landscape photography, for example, choosing a cheaper lens can often lead to sharper results. I'm very glad Canon decided to do something different. They created a lens with a simple classic design that for a little money will give many people the ability to create with very shallow depths of field. The image quality of the old 50mm 1.2 lens had been highly valued by photographers for years, as evidenced by the vast numbers of used lenses currently available for sale. The slightly wider focal length also looks interesting, even closer to how we perceive reality. I feel a bit sorry for Nikon, which, despite common misconceptions, has developed small and lightweight professional lenses. In my opinion, the set presented at launch of the system is in fact the perfect set for a landscape photographer seeking maximum quality. However, if you always thought that the fast, more expensive lens produces better image quality when stopped down compared to cheaper designs, today's episode should give you food for thought. Yes, stopping down the lens improves its sharpness, but the idea that f1.2 lenses are better than 1.8 ones when stopped down is just a repeated myth. And much more attention should be paid to the lens construction and its actual performance in tests. Let me know if you were surprised by the results in this video. Were you planning to buy the new 45 1.2 and changed your mind? Or maybe on the contrary, you are even more willing to buy it. Personally, I'm sticking with my 50 1.4, which seems like the most effective compromise. However, I would love to see a professional L lens with 2.0 aperture. And as for me, that's all for today. Thanks for your support and time spent together, and see you in the next episode. Bye!